Stephen A. Smith and Bill Simmons talking about when Redick and Kendrick Perkins kind of got into it on Stephen A. Smith's show, I think on First Take. This is going to be an interesting conversation. So we like to talk about sports media in general. That's what we do. And I respect Bill Simmons and Stephen A. Smith quite a bit. So I'm interested to hear their take on this. And I hope they get into more of a conversation of, hot takes and controversy and what drives the landscape, things like that. So we're going to react as only we can do. Very excited for this video. I've been waiting to watch it with all of you. So let's get right into it.
All right, so First Take, you had an evolution.
Stephen A. Smith seems to be, his video, he must be sitting on Mars or 20,000 leagues under the sea. Not sure why his video looks like this, but it is what it is.
With this show.
Yeah.
And watching, different guests, you've had some really compelling arguments.
Yeah.
It's gone to some dark places a couple of times.
Yeah.
The way ESPN kind of pumps the stuff out on social.
Sure.
It seems like you almost get rewarded. Sometimes not you, but other people on the show, kind of the crazier that take it.
100%. So in today's day and age of journalism, or however you want to say it, media, I guess, you do get rewarded for going viral, for a clip or a quote that can be turned into a TikTok or an Instagram reel or a Twitter video, or it can be shared or whatever. We live in a world where you got pretty much 10 seconds. We do a lot of long form videos here, but there's a lot of places where I'm sure economically it makes more sense to do 5, 10, 20-second clips and hope that one of them takes off and goes crazy. Controversy creates cash, right? Hot takes is the name of the business. That has been a thing for years. That has been a thing since Stephen A. Smith and Skip Bayless kind of pioneered that. They kind of pioneered the embrace debate, hot takes only, and to just kind of drive reaction. And sports media has not really changed since then. It's slightly changed. I would say that the big switch was it went from that to kind of these personalities of you want to listen to them because they're like a friend, like the Pat McAfee's, the Dave Portnoy's, the Barstool, like Big Cat, like those kind of guys. People like listening to them and following them because they're regular dudes. They want to see them watch a football game the same way we do. They want to talk. They want to hear about who they're betting on, not because they want to find winners, but because they want to join in on the fun, right? They want to watch these guys crack open a beer and do stuff like that. That's what right now I think is a bit of a shift. There's a lot of shows like that where they don't do the hot takes. They don't even do like really game recap. They just kind of are dudes. They're just kind of guys. They're just kind of sports fans. So, but besides that, the hot take was definitely the most recent and most powerful era of this kind of sports media.
Is sometimes that's the one that hits the hardest. The stuff with Perkins and JJ and the Jokic and Embiid debate, which I thought was one of my least favorite NBA subplots probably the last 20 years, and certainly.
Now, unfortunately, what he's talking about is when obviously this became a race thing with Embiid and Jokic, and I think there's an unwritten rule with hot takes where you don't want to peel the curtain back. You don't want to make things too real. You don't want to make things, you never want to call out each other for not being an athlete or being a lesser of an athlete or just being an analyst or whatever. These unwritten rules. And I think race is an unwritten rule in a lot of them because it doesn't allow for like this free flowing dynamic conversation, because once you say that, the conversation is basically over, and that can make for bad television. So strictly from a TV perspective and a debate perspective, I think those are unwritten rules. You don't want to bring up it's the same stuff people say all the time. You don't want to bring up religion, don't want to bring up race, because once that gets thrown out there, the game is pretty much over.
One of the worst media subplots. As you look back at that whole stretch, do you wish things had unfolded differently? Do you feel like that's just the outcome of the show, where there's going to be tough conversations like that?
But are you asking me about JJ and Perk, or overall is what I'm asking? What are you asking?
Just the narrative. All right, you're right. I phrased that wrong. The narrative coming out, Perk, his job is to try to provoke on a show like that, right? And he's trying to provoke conversation about, all right, why is Jokic going to win a third straight MVP? Why isn't Embiid, and starts listing MVPs back to 1990? Why are 80% of the voters white and stuff like that? And all of a sudden the debate turned. And as that's happening, how are you, because it's your show, you're in control of it, and then you're watching JJ, who's really mad about it, and he's bringing his stuff, and they're starting to really go at it. But this is your show, like it's your house. People are, these are your guests that have been invited over. What's your role in that? And do you feel like,
I think what Stephen A will say, I think Stephen A understands the landscape and the game so well that he's gonna basically say there's no rules. You know, you certainly can't have that kind of a show and that kind of a dynamic if you put rules on it. It's just one of those things where unfortunately it got to that point. And did he kind of, you know, like I said, break an unwritten rule? Maybe, but I don't think you can't put governors on those kind of things. Sometimes stuff happens, right? Sometimes things happen and you take a shot, you take a risk, it doesn't work out. Sometimes they do work out, but I don't think Stephen A. Smith, regardless of it being his show or not, I don't think he would like say, whoa, guys, let's not talk about that. Once it takes that turn, you just let it go, right? You just let it go and you let it play out. And that clip stands on its own, and that moment stands on its own, and that episode stands on its own, and it's forgotten about, and then you move on to the next one.
that can go too far?
That's a great question. First of all, it can't go too far. Secondly, in that particular show, it did go too far.
Okay, so he said it did go too far. So he's acknowledging that you don't want to get to that place, which we said, you know. So that's interesting. That's interesting but that's more than like unwritten rule thing that I'm talking about. You know, like that's going too far, right? You don't want to take it out of the landscape. You almost want to make, you know how like when two friends are arguing and then it gets really heated and it almost comes to blows, or maybe it does come to blows. And it's like, guys, look, like once you take it out of that realm, then it's not fun anymore. No one wants to watch that. No one wants to watch two people almost get into a fight over LeBron versus Jordan. But if people do want to watch like a heated discussion of LeBron and Jordan, there is a boiling point with this kind of stuff for a viewer.
I thought both of them were wrong to a degree in terms of how far it went. Because on one hand, I thought, see, you got to remember, Perkins had said what he said days earlier.
Yep.
JJ wasn't on the show. And so what happens is, me being now the executive producer of the show, not just the main talent on the show, I saw that days earlier. I understood where Perk was coming from. But if you recall, I was debating against him when he had initially said it, and I disagreed with him. I said that has nothing to do with it. That's not true. But I didn't know the amount of white voters compared to black voters or whatever. I just said that has nothing to do with it. Jokic can ball. This is what he brings to the table. I've never heard anybody saying that he's stat chasing or anything like that. Never. I cover the league. I've never heard that, Perk, right? But
that's something else I've noticed with a lot of the JJ Redick clips is like there'll be a topic that gets brought up, and then a couple days later, JJ will get brought in to like check the person on the thing. And I do think that's kind of unfair, because a lot of the times on these shows, I'm sure you're just throwing stuff out there. You're just throwing hot take out there, whatever out there. Then a guy gets a couple days to like research and basically plan this rebuttal, and then you're backed into a corner where you have to defend this thesis, right? You have to defend this hot take, and you may not want to defend the hot take, but now you have to. You may not be prepared to defend the hot take, so then you just keep digging yourself into a hole. You know, you can't say, you're right, that probably wasn't, you know, you're right, I probably shouldn't have said that. You have to just defend it. And especially with a topic like that, things can get out of control really quick.
I also have to take this into consideration. If Bill Simmons were to come on First Take, no one comes on First Take without coming through me. I'm the person that everybody comes to now. Pete McConville and Tom DeCordia are now there. James Dunn is a producer as well. They do an exceptional job. Dave Roberts oversees it. Obviously, I answer to him. We all answer to him. But they all defer to me. And so for me,
it's your house. You're inviting people to the table.
So everybody I brought on the show, this is what I demand from them. Be your true, authentic self. Don't come on here with no phony shit. Don't have me or our audience looking at you and thinking you're faking something or you're saying something for just effect. You need to feel it. Here's where it gets tricky, Bill. What happens is sometimes in the heat of a debate, you're saying something. And then you catch yourself, you're like, oh shit, what did I just say?
This is what I think athletes, and I've said this before here, this is where I think athletes struggle, is in this moment right here. What I think happens with athletes is, specifically on these kind of shows, is they can be the media person to an extent. But when everything gets raised and the heat gets picked up, they're going to defer to their ultra competitive, ultra alpha status. And that's when they can drop the mask. They can lose the sight that I'm on TV. I'm still on a TV show. I'm still basically playing a character. This is being seen by blank million people. And they just start kind of spouting off. They just kind of start wilding out. It turns into a locker room disagreement. It turns into the kind of stuff we hear, when mic'd up players and stuff like that. I just heard a story from Shane Gillis, comedian Shane Gillis, who went to the Beer Olympics with Taylor Lewan and Will Compton from Bussin' with the Boys. And he said that he thought it was going to be fun, and he said it was a nightmare. Because he said what happened was, once competition got brought into it, all the jovial this and that and who you thought these people were, not the case anymore. They're athletes for a reason. They run different. They tick different. These are different kind of people. And he said it wasn't fun because it was so competitive. People were being super mean, being super physical. Nothing was a joke. Nothing was, whatever. And that's what I've noticed from athletes on shows. That's when you get Jalen Rose calling out Skip Bayless because Skip Bayless played junior varsity basketball. Jalen Rose got heated to a point to where he said, you know what? F it. In my mind, I'm not even on TV anymore. I'm now just going to go at this guy. And when you have JJ Redick and Kendrick Perkins, all of a sudden that is way easier for that to happen.
I really didn't mean to go there, right?
Yeah.
And so I stopped it by saying, Perk, there's no truth to that. This is not what's said about Jokic. He's not stat chasing. People ain't looking at him, etc. Yeah, sure, you got voters that have their preferences, white, black, and otherwise, and it may not have anything to do with race. It might have something to do with something else. But everybody's got their preferences to some degree. We understand that. But I think you're walking down the wrong road here. And I left it at that. What I didn't know was the fury, that at least it appeared to be fury to me, that JJ Redick was feeling over the subject. And so when he came on one hand, I understood why he felt the way he felt, rather, because of what Perkins said. On the other hand, I was saying to JJ, this is your colleague, on the show.
Yeah. That's another thing that I think can happen a lot is when you are brought on to defend a point or to take down a point or whatever, it is easy to say I know there's blank million people watching. If I absolutely eviscerate this guy and destroy his argument and absolutely rip him to shreds, I'm going to look like a god on social media. This is going to be clipped. This is going to be whatever. This is going to be great for my career. I mean, there's plenty of times where you think about if should make something up. If I got brought on Skip Bayless's show to talk about a topic, it's easy for me to go on there with the idea of I want to destroy Skip Bayless because then people are going to think I'm the man, right? So Stephen A. Smith's saying you all both work for the same company. You have to kind of protect him too. You can't eviscerate him. You can't absolutely rip him apart and destroy him because you're going to work together again, right? You're on the same show. You're about to go to the cafeteria together. You're both getting paid by the same people. Pull back a little bit, make your point, do your thing, but pull back. Don't try and end this guy's career just to elevate your own.
Show. And if you feel that way, did you have to come at him like that? Yeah. Because it did get uncomfortable. Now, we argued about a point because Skip Bayless and I used to argue, or Max and I used to argue, or anybody that you see on the show would argue. We're arguing over the subject matter that we're talking about, and that's that. What's up, man? See you later. Good job.
It's not a personal
You'll see me the minute we go to commercial break. Way to go, bro. No problem, no matter how heated it got, because it was on the subject. JJ and Kendrick made it appear like it was about them.
Yeah, it was a personal issue.
And that's when I knew it was bad, and I stepped in. I said, all right, guys, all right, cool out. One point after another, make your point. Let's move on. But it wasn't comfortable. You're right about that. And it hasn't happened again because we spoke to both of them about it.
Have they've been on the show together since, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, no problem. No problem.
Yeah, I think, the most uncomfortable I've seen, and this was a long time ago when Jalen went at Skip Bayless that time about.
Yeah, boom, bam, nailed that one. That's a infamous one for sure, because that pulled back the curtains, and they had to address it. And I'll tell you why they had to address it, because Skip Bayless at that point was the guy. He was the moneymaker. He was the ratings guy. So you couldn't have an athlete completely undress him to where the audience would no longer believe in him. Because if the audience no longer believes in him, then that ain't good for ratings, right? It's the same thing with, like, it would be similar to if Sylvester Stallone was playing Rocky and an actual boxer had enough, like in the movie, and just embarrassed Rocky. All of a sudden, you can't make any more Rocky movies, right? If Mike Tyson gets in there and says, you know what, I don't feel like acting anymore, I'm going to be Mike Tyson, and just tears Sylvester Stallone apart, that would be good for Mike Tyson, but it'd be terrible for the Rocky franchise. And that's exactly what happened with Jalen Rose and Skip Bayless. And that's why if you YouTube, Jalen Rose apology, Jalen Rose, Skip Bayless, they made him go on a bit of a tour of reestablishing Skip Bayless to save Skip Bayless's image. And that's what was dangerous about this Perkins and Redick debate.
How many points and Jalen, like, he had real reasons to do it, right?
Yes.
And he felt really strongly about it, and he was tired of certain things, and he just did it, and it was super uncomfortable.
And at the time, I told Skip, because I wasn't on the show at that time. I came on like months later.
Yeah.
I wasn't on the show at that time. But, obviously Skip and Jalen's relationship hadn't been the same since.
No.
And I was like, yo, Skip, you came at him.
But that's when Skip, I think I've talked about that video actually before, but that's when Skip, I think, thought that everyone knew the game. And Skip thought, I can just say whatever I want because everyone's playing along. Everyone's playing the same thing. No one's going to ruin me. We're all in the same thing. And Jalen had enough and said, I'm not going to play the game anymore. And that was the first time I think Skip probably was checked like that. But that is always the danger of the athlete media dynamic, is that they have the leverage. They always have it in their back pocket. And will they ever use it? Like, will they ever get there? And once you do go there, it's hard to go back.
He came back. I mean, fair is fair. Now,
right.
He might not have needed to go that far, and I get it. But we also got to know our place. Like, for example, Skip has been a journalist for decades before becoming a columnist, and working in Chicago and LA and Dallas and all of these other places, right? That's your lane. Bill Simmons knows basketball. I know basketball. We ain't Jalen Rose. We're not a member of the Fab Five with a 13-year career in the NBA. And so, when you're talking about the game and you're trying to compare on-court significance, well, I know that I wasn't on the level of Jalen Rose. And Skip at the time should have known that too. And the argument should have been about what you know about this business, as opposed to players themselves as if you were one, when that was not the case. That's all. And I think that a lot of times when we're arguing with athletes, one of the reasons you see a lot of athletes on the air, you notice they're laughing a lot and they're smiling a lot when they're talking to me, because they know, Bill, I know I'm not them. I'm not trying to come at them as if I know what they know about every little nuance.
But he certainly has. I mean, that's not true. Like, Stephen A. Smith made a career of dressing down Slava Medvedenko and Kwame Brown, and he certainly has dressed down those players. He hasn't had the utmost respect for all players because he knows he's not a player. He may be able to say that now, but go ahead and YouTube Stephen A. Smith, Kwame Brown. Go ahead and YouTube Stephen A. Smith, Slava Medvedenko. You're going to see a whole bunch of clips where he's not acting like he knows that there's a difference between the two. They're And I also, I do push back a little bit about the idea that a Bill Simmons can't know more about basketball than blank player. He may not know what it actually feels like to be on the court, but he may be able to say that he's just as much of an expert as a whoever player. Not every player knows the game. Not every player understands the game to that level. I think it's unfair to just like defer to the athlete being the expert. They're certainly the expert of like the actual what it feels like to be the player, the road to get there, and the intricacies of being a pro athlete. But as far as like recapping a game or previewing a game or talking about the league or anything like that, I don't think there's a big difference between Bill Simmons and Jalen Rose.
Because that's impossible. But I can say as a pundit, as a person who's been a journalist, this is the perspective that I'm coming from. Imagine me walking into the locker room and confronting you as a scribe, as a pundit. How would you react if I came at you with these questions or these perspectives? And so they recognize that, and it makes for better conversation because they don't feel challenged as if you're diminishing them and what they've accomplished. And I think that's incredibly important to do.
Well,
but like I said, Stephen A. Smith certainly has dressed down players, and Kwame Brown was the number 1 overall pick. So Stephen A. Smith was certainly not taking into account his physical abilities, the talent that got him to the first overall pick, all that stuff. He was absolutely talking down to those accomplishments.
I remember, I think you were on the show when Richard Sherman came on that time and went at Skip, and it was kind of promoted. That got me suspended from Twitter because I saw it and I was like, I feel like this is not elevating the company. This is angry. I don't like it. So I did like 2 tweets about it, and they were like, you can't tweet about another ESPN show, you moron. And they suspended me from Twitter. And I was like, you're right. I actually shouldn't have said anything.
I would tell you this. Here's where I think that thinking that you just expressed about Richard Sherman doing that on the show is wrong.
Yeah.
If an athlete listens to me or you, and we constantly call them on the call, they have a right to get fed up one day and come on the air and call us out. I
agree with that. I think if an athlete heard something, like, I'm trying to think of an example, but if someone hears the criticism enough and they say, look, I want to go defend myself, I certainly think that is perfectly okay. You do take the risk of it getting superheated or it falling off the rails or it going too far, because obviously they're very emotional about the subject. If they're basically saying, I'm going to come defend myself, and then it puts the on-air talent in kind of an awkward situation. So maybe that's something where as a TV like exec or a producer, you probably say, we probably don't want to do that. We're not going to air that. You certainly have all the means to make your own video on YouTube or on Twitter or Instagram or whatever, but we're not going to air that, just whatever. So I kind of see both sides, but I think it doesn't elevate the company. It is fine for him to want to defend himself, though.
Yeah.
So of course it wasn't a good look. Of course it wasn't a good thing. But my argument to John Skipper at the time, who was the boss, and Norby Williamson and others of the world, my argument to them was that, but it's still necessary. Because even though that wasn't a good look, what was good is that we made sure to not edit out what an athlete had to say about us.
And maybe that is where you do say, like, look, we're going to take this on the chin. Like, hey, Skip, you're about to take this on the chin. This is going to be really, really miserable for 30 minutes, but the transparency and all that stuff is probably a better look in the long run. And it might be also one of those things where it's like people love watching chaos. They will love watching a complete just, all hell break loose. So if you go into it with that idea, like all hell is going to break loose, this is going to be a disaster, but we're going to do it anyways, take it on the chin for us. Like that is a possibility too for that type of thing, that they said, come on, Richard, lay it on, and Skip just smile and nod and take the check.
Since we talked about them, because a lot of times with athletes, what will piss them off more than anything is what we call the bully pulpit. We have it, and a lot of times they did it or they don't. And because of that, it's like, wait a minute, it's not right. If you're going to do it, then take it. I had an athlete come up to me last year and pat me on the back and was like this. I'm saying, he said, I want to see if you got that same smoke in front of my face that you have on television. And I looked at him and I said, I'm standing here, ain't I? Who the hell you think you're talking to? I meant what the hell I said on TV. You need me to say it again? You see what I'm saying? Now, I wasn't trying to disrespect him, but what I was trying to say is, ain't no act. I said it, I meant it. I stand on it. If I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong. Show me why I'm wrong. But don't think that you're going to intimidate me just because you're coming up in my face. I'm not scared of that. I said what I said and I meant what I meant. And I think that's important to be able to do. And I think it's important to be able to allow an athlete to do the same to you.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting thing, because if you think an athlete sucks and the athlete comes up and says, you know, are you going to stand by that? And you say, I do stand by that. I think you absolutely suck. That's probably not going to be great, right? It's not going to go over well. Like, I don't think the athlete's going to be like, damn, respect. I think it'll probably get pretty heated, you know? So it is an interesting world, though, for sure. I love these conversations. I love the conversations behind the camera, behind the media landscape, behind all that stuff, just as much sometimes as like on field or on court conversations, you know, being able to, especially with guys like Stephen A. Smith and Bill Simmons, who really, really changed the landscape for a long period of time in media, in sports media. You know, guys like that, Colin Cowherd, Jim Rome, you know, those kind of guys. It's crazy to navigate that for a long period of time. When you take into all they have to do with ratings and the producers and the networks, and then actually covering the games and everyone hanging on to every word they say. I mean, I know, like, on this channel, you know, we're probably in the ballpark of like 30 to 50,000 views a month, something like that. And which whatever, that's a lot of eyeballs, and there's a lot of comments, and a lot of the comments are positive, but a lot of the comments too can get relatively heated when a fan base or whoever doesn't agree with what I'm saying. I couldn't imagine what these cats hear after every show, what their Twitter ats look like, what their DMs look like, what their comments on their YouTube videos look like, what it's like for them to go eat. You know, I mean, sometimes I can't imagine what it's like for Stephen A. Smith to go to the ESPYs and to see, or an NBA game, and to see 20 athletes that he knows he's skewered over the last however many months. You know, it's easy for a pundit to say, yeah, here's the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL, and I think this guy's probably the worst quarterback in the NFL. And then to see that guy, it's got to be like, oh man, this is a little wild. So it's an interesting landscape. They're kind of like, they're somewhere in between professional wrestlers and actors, where they're playing a character, but they're also like their own individual person. You know, they don't, like, is Stephen A. Smith or is Bill Simmons just an elevated version or an enhanced version of who they actually are for TV? Yeah, probably. But they can't ever take it off. You know, Bill Simmons is Bill Simmons. Even if he's being enhanced, or Skip Bayless. Skip Bayless is absolutely probably enhanced on TV to make his character look more whatever. But he's still Skip Bayless when he goes to the grocery store. People don't know that. People don't know he's enhanced. Just like Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan is not actually the character he was when he was in the wrestling ring, but people don't know that. People don't assume that he's like Tom Cruise is different than the main character in Mission Impossible. That's you know, like, people can differentiate the actor from the character. They have a hard time differentiating the sports pundit from the character, or the wrestler from the character, right? Everyone knows the Undertaker is the Undertaker. They don't know him as Mark Calloway, his actual name. They just assume he is actually the Lord of Darkness. And it's an interesting dynamic. But let me know in the comments below what you think. There's a bit of a long-form conversation here. So where do you come down on athletes and sports media, and when they have those controversies and whatnot? Great discussion from Stephen A. Smith and Bill Simmons. Stephen A., get your webcam figured out, son. If you need any pointers, let me know how to look this crispy. But thank you for watching, ladies and gentlemen. I will see you on the next video.